Hey guys, what's going on? Happy holidays. We got a plus 23 Everbloom here. I am playing the Prot Warrior and I am also with some guildmates. Uh, as usual, I will go over the dungeon mechanics and affixes and what you can do as maybe enhancement as in shamans or warriors or whatever class you're playing. I'll give you a bit of tips on what you could do to help. But let's start off with the affixes. We have Tyrannical, Incorporeal, and Spiteful. Tyrannical makes the bosses more difficult, increasing their health and damage output. Incorporeal spawns 1 to 2 purple beings that will cast and cause you to deal and heal for 50% less. All you have to do to prevent that is either interrupt them multiple times until they go away, or hard CC by using a polymorph or incapacitate and stuff like that. And Spiteful, when one of the units dies, they spawn a shade that will chase after you and hit you. All you gotta do is kind of run away or CC them, and they will fall on their own because they lose HP as they are alive. So now onto the mechanics of the mobs. First, we have the Naturalist. It's going to do a cast called Dancing Thorns. That's basically going to go on the tank. Just does moderate damage. The next one is going to be Choking Vines, which will be a magic effect or in a channel. So if it goes off, it will stun the target. It will be a magical effect, so you can either interrupt the cast, dispel it, stun it, whatever you want to do to interrupt it. As for the Dread Petals, basically every time they hit the tank, they get a stack of damage increase and a movement slow, so it's not much to worry about. We wipe here because we accidentally pulled the big tree man, so I'm guessing somebody had unfortunately hit an edge or something and got pushed into him, so sucks. But we actually wipe a couple times in this key and we still end up timing it. Just barely, but you know, still counts. But anyways, we're gonna run it back and go back and do that pull. You don't really want to pull the big tree guy, and the reason why is he causes a root where you have to kill the roots, and then he also causes like tornadoes that will silence you if you're in them. So if you don't kill the roots fast enough, you will not be able to get out of the silence tornadoes, unfortunately. But as for an overall on this dungeon, it's fairly straightforward. It's just, I think it's one of the more difficult ones because of the amount of casters and the way the boss mechanics work. Usually the first boss is pretty simple and groups don't have an issue. It usually comes down to the second and third bosses where the groups fall apart. But as you can see, those arcane circles, those are the incorporeal beings. You see how they've been dealt with. Very simple. Once you do that, they cannot be broken out, so you don't have to worry about accidentally hitting them or not. And now we get into the caster room. Now, if you have a Demon Hunter tank or a Death Knight tank or even a Death Knight in general, this room is very simple because they can just grip or silence the entire room. As a Prot Warrior, you don't really have that luxury. You could take the AoE interrupt from the left side of the protection tree, but it's not worth dropping the cooldown reduction on Demoralizing Shout, unfortunately. If we could take the interrupt, that would be awesome, but yeah, unfortunately we cannot. But the Naturalists, they do their stun and stuff that you want to watch for. It's the Mender that does the healing wave cast. It's not too big of a deal, but you should just interrupt it anyways. You don't really want cast going off in general, so try to interrupt what you can, where Choking Vines is the priority, and Healing Wave is kind of meh. As you can see, it healed for 20%, so it is kind of a pain in the butt, but is it game breaking? No. Unlike choking vines, where if your whole group is under that effect, you're gonna wipe. There's no really getting out of it. If you're if you're a shaman in general and you get that and you're close by, you can still thunderstorm because thunderstorm is usable while in stuns. So hopefully if you have a usable thing while in a stun, it's a CC to help you prevent the cast from going off any longer. But now we're on to the first boss, named Witherbark. This guy has the most simple mechanics. It's the easiest boss in the entire dungeon by far. So the first mechanic is going to be the tank buster called Parched Breath. This is going to be a frontal on the tank. So basically you want the boss aiming towards a wall and your back to the wall. This is also a magical effect, so go ahead and use spell block or any form of magical mitigation or any damage reduction mitigation as well. It does quite a bit of damage, so just be careful. The next mechanic is going to be the roots. Basically he's going to target a random ranged and he's going to send roots out. Basically you want them to be aimed around the boss, as you can see in the back, because during this phase, his brittle phase, which happens whenever he runs out of energy, you want to have the orbs hit the roots. That way you can spawn some adds instead of having to take out the orbs. Now, once an orb reaches him, he gains 25 energy, so once he gains 4 orbs, he is back at 100 energy. Now, are the adds any really dangerous? No. You just tank them and off you go. Do as much damage to the boss as possible. Don't worry about killing the adds. They will die over time to passive cleave. There's really no need to worry about them. The main priority is making sure those roots are in the correct spot to get as many of those water orbs as possible. And you have to watch out, because if you are collecting the adds, make sure you spin the boss quickly, because he instantly casts Parched Breath. The best way to do this is usually to have your range spread out around the boss and cover as many spots as possible. Once the water orb reaches the roots, it consumes the roots and you have to replace it, essentially. So, it's also another reason to keep him far away from the water so the orbs don't get to him as fast either. There is a way to, so before you start the boss, you can also pull the dread petals, which are in the room to the left. You just have to be careful, because as soon as this guy is triggered, he spawns the gate, causing you to be unable to travel in between the rooms. Usually a boss, it takes a couple seconds for it to activate. This guy, it's instant, so be very careful. But this guy is the most simple boss in here. Very easy, very straightforward. If you want to use Lust here, you can wait for his first brittle phase and send it. But the best way to use Lust is to use it on the first pull of the dungeon. That way it's back up for the council boss and then Yalnu as well. So you get 3 values of Lust rather than just 2. But as you can see, we're going to now pull the dread petals, and then we will be moving on to the next part of the dungeon. Again, if you are a paladin, warrior, or even monk in other classes as well, you can use movement impairment removals such as Hand of Freedom, Avatar, and Tiger's Lust to get rid of the debuff the dread petal gives your tank. And the dread petal thing is pretty painful sometimes, but for a prot warrior it's very minimal, as they only deal magical damage, or not magic damage, physical damage, sorry. So it's very irrelevant for a prot warrior. I've been enjoying prot warrior so much more. But onto this pack, we got an Abomination and Berserkers. The Berserkers will charge at a random ranged and do a whirlwind. As for the Abomination, he will cast Poison Claw, which you can use Spell Reflect to reflect back onto him. And then he casts Noxious Eruption, which is a AoE cleave to everybody in the group that leaves a dot on you as well, so be careful. But for the Berserkers, you can just stun their Whirlwind and it'll be over. You can even use Ring of Peace to prevent them entirely, so it depends on how you want to deal with them, or don't deal with it at all, it's up to you. Yeah. If you are playing Prot Warrior, and maybe you've been struggling getting certain things, don't forget Shield Wall is on a very small cooldown. It's reduced by your anger management as well as your shield slam, so rather than being an actual 4-minute cooldown, it's actually only about a minute to maybe a minute 20 seconds, so it's a very short cooldown with a massive damage reduction, so feel free to use it almost on cooldown if you want. But you have a lot of utilities to reduce all forms of damage, as well as Spell Reflect to deal a bit of extra damage while taking none in return, which this dungeon relies a lot on your Spell Reflect management, so just understand how to use it, such as on the Abominations, you want to reflect the Poison Claw as much as possible. And if you can't reflect it, try using your spell block, because that lasts 30 seconds. So it's technically only a minute cooldown. So it's very, very useful. You also have Demoralizing Shout, which reduces the damage of everything in the area by about 15% or something like that. So you have a lot of utility and a lot of damage reduction to send out. So as you can see, I start taking a bit of damage here, and then as soon as everything's in front of me, I take none. I also use Shield Wall here just to get it on cooldown and use it. But warriors are the best tanks to take physical damage. Nothing can compare to it. Especially like a boss like Waycrest Manor is the Soulbound Goliath. That guy's damage ramps up a lot, and tanks have to bring him to fire. If you have a Prot Warrior tank and you use your mitigation correctly, you actually don't have to bring him to fire ever. Because I did a 23 on a Tyrannical week, and I was able to tank him until he had about 125 stacks, which is, I don't know how much damage, but it actually did hurt by the end. But I wasn't getting one shot yet, so that's all that mattered. So you do have to switch into defensive stance if you need to, but for the majority of the time you should be in battle stance. You should rarely have to use defensive stance. Unless you know, okay, I don't have Shield Wall, I don't have Spell Block, and I don't have Spell Reflect. Okay, let's just use defensive stance, because it is a 20% damage reduction, but you lose 5% damage. So the trade-off is not really worth it in the damage department. But as we come up to the second boss here, the Ancient Protectors, also known as the Council, we wipe on it, unfortunately. But with the power of editing, I skipped the wipe because it took us 5 minutes, so I felt like the video may just get it a bit shorter, so it'll make it a little bit more appealing to those. But this boss gives a lot of group a lot of trouble, and the reason for that is because of the amount of casts that are going off. So the important thing is Earthshaper Telu, make sure you interrupt the Toxic Bloom. He's going to have 2 casts, Nature's Wrath and Toxic Bloom. Basically, you want to interrupt Nature's Wrath as much as possible while making sure somebody has the interrupt for Toxic Bloom. If it does go off, it is a poison effect, but it goes on everybody. So if you have a shaman in your group, you can actually use your Poison Cleanse to get out of it, and it will work. Unfortunately, it went off, so that means you guys have an issue in the group, but you can easily get it without it. As for Big Man Dulhu, I don't know how to say that, but anyway, this guy has a really weird name. He's got one mechanic, which is a charge effect, and it's a tank buster. I haven't quite figured out the proper mitigation, but when I use spell block, it seems to do less damage, and I don't know. But anyways, he's going to charge at you and leave a poison puddle behind, as well as throw out poison puddles at your teammates, no matter where they are. So if you have a melee group, you're going to want to run away from the boss and have everybody run away from him so you don't have poison spawning under him so you can continue attacking him, because you want to focus down one of these guys first. So Life Warden Gola, I think that's his name, he's got 2 casts, Water Bolt and Revitalize. You want to make sure you're kicking Revitalize in as many Water Bolts as possible. Revitalize heals one of his teammates and also puts a heal over time on them. So if it does go off, make sure to purge it as fast as possible to reduce the amount of health he's going to gain from the hot. It's very important. If it keeps going off, then you're probably not going to make the boss check. But if one is casting and the other one isn't, the other one is going to be doing AoE damage consistently, so just be wary of that. Use your defensives consistently. It's very, very important. But once you take out one of the council, the other caster won't use his special ability for a while, so you don't have to worry about Revitalize. You can just keep spam kicking his Water Bolt. But this boss gives a lot of groups trouble, and the reason for it is because of the amount of damage going out due to casts, as well as poison placement being improper. If it does get in the wrong place, it can really wipe your group because you can't quite damage the bosses. But as this guy falls over, we make our way to the 3rd room for Archmage Soul. Alright, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, let's go, let's go. Come on. Yay. Alright, now we're making our way to Archmage Soul. So this is where a lot of groups have trouble, and the reason for it is because of the amount of damage that's going out group wide and the way you have to move. So the first thing we got here is a Pyromancer. He's going to do Pyroblast and Thunderbolt Salvo. Pyroblast is an interruptible cast, can also be spell reflected. It's key for warriors. Make sure you interrupt it because it does a lot of upfront damage as well as apply a dot. But the Cinderbolt Salvo causes AoE damage, and if one person falls over, then it causes the rest of the group to take more damage because it shoots a number of bolts and not a set AoE, if that makes sense. The next, we got the Arcane Mancer. He is going to cast Arcane Blast as well as Spatial Disruption. Spatial Disruption gets sent at the farthest target or one of your ranged. I haven't quite figured that out yet, but basically it will go towards them. The farther away you are, the longer it will take for the swirly to erupt, so make sure you are far away and not in melee range. As you can see, if it ends up in melee range, it'll almost go off instantly as he finishes the cast, which causes significant amount of damage. But now we get on to these guys. So we got a Pyromancer, an Arcane Mancer, and an Ice Caller. The Ice Caller casts Frostbolt as well as a glacial thing. Find out what it's called here in a second. Cold Fusion, that summons orbs around a target and they close inward. If you get hit by one of the orbs, you gain a magic effect, causing you to be stunned and take damage over time, so do not get hit by them. Very, very important. It will make your healer very mad. Although you are dispellable, it's still not good to get hit by it, ever. So do watch your positioning. It does get harder. As you can see, Krios got hit and he's taking a lot of damage. Thankfully, Hawk is able to dispel him in time. But as we finish off this pack, the boss becomes vulnerable. But because I like to have a lot of room in this room, we take out the rest of the assistants over here. That way the ranged have more room to move around and don't have to worry too much. Even if they get pulled during the boss, it's not too big of a deal, to be honest, because they really don't do much damage. They do a Fungal Fist, which I haven't figured out what type of damage it is, because even if I use block or spell block, it still does the same amount, so it's really weird. But on to Archmage Soul. So she has 3 different AoE effects. She does Cinderbolt Storm, which causes AoE damage to everybody and spawn fire puddles. And then she does a frost one called Glacial Fusion, I think it is. Basically, it's just like the Frost Mage, it summons the orb that collapse on you. And then the Arcane one is the one that's the most difficult, is it sends out the Arcane orb towards the farthest target, just like the Arcane Mancer. But once it reaches its position and explodes, it pulls you towards it, so you really have to be careful on where you are. So she casts these in pairs, so you have to be very careful. The first 2 will have fire, then it'll be ice, fire, and then it will be frost, ice, then, or not frost, ice, that makes no sense. Frost, arcane, and then arcane fire, and then it will repeat after that. The fire one is when you want to use your defensive. The other ones you don't really have to worry, you just have to worry about positioning. As you can see, when the Cinderbolt Storm goes out, everybody is taking massive amounts of damage, so make sure you use some sort of mitigation if you have it, or help by healing yourself if you can. And if you are a prot warrior on this fight, make sure you are trying to spell reflect as many of her casts as possible. The AoE stuff such as Cinderstorm and things you cannot reflect, but the Frostbolt, Fireball, and Arcane Blast you can reflect, and they will do about 1,000,000 damage each. Based on key level obviously, but it does do a lot of damage. As you can see by my damage output, it is quite high, and it's a lot of fun. That's one of the reasons why I've fallen in love with Prot Warrior as my tank, is because you can spell reflect so much stuff that doesn't make sense. It does so much damage. It's great. And with the addition to spell block, you have a much better time against magical effects. And with the amount of cooldowns shield block or shield wall has, you can almost use it all the time. But as we take out Archmage Soul, we make our way to the next boss room of Yalnu. First, we're going to take up some assistance, but that is okay. So Yalnu is the final boss here. We have to protect Stormwind, even though I don't want to, but you know. Basically, he has 3 mechanics, and although they aren't difficult mechanics, they do a significant amount of damage, so you have to be very, very generous with your defensives and help your healer as much as possible by using them. The first one, which comes out throughout the entire fight, is his Shockwave. Now it's a frontal cone on the tank, which the tank can sidestep, but the big issue is it does AoE damage to the entire group, and it'll be about 50% of your health pool. It's quite a lot. I don't know how players in the 27s and 30s even deal with this crap, because geez. But anyways, his second mechanic is going to be Verdant Eruption, and that will spawn a tree monster. And what this tree monster does is he cancels out the fire beam, which is increasing the boss's damage taken, but also doing AoE damage, as you can see. So they have a wicked overlap with Colossal Blow, and that, as you can see, Krios fell over. It is a lot of damage. While the tree erupts for about 20% of your health, and the boss hits you with a Colossal Blow for about 50 to 60, it's quite insane. I really dislike how spiky all these damage effects are. It makes healers' lives miserable, to be honest. I would like to see healing and damage output reduced, essentially, just to even them out, so it's not like you're panicking as soon as a mechanic happens. I think it's quite absurd how much damage goes out, because, like, look at that, it's just utterly dropped below 50% there off of one hit. It's quite crazy. And here we have a tree. As you can see, everybody's taking a lot of damage, and here comes the Colossal Blow mixed with a tree explosion, and everybody's at 20%. Thankfully, Hawk was able to keep everybody alive this time. But yeah, like, damage output in dungeons. I do not envy healers. I have healed dungeons and I don't like it. It is way too much damage, in my opinion. I think it could definitely be looked at. It's quite terrifying, to be honest, but it is what it is. But we're at about 50% now. Working on them, and we end up having a really crazy ending. As you'll see why. It unfortunately Krios missed this poor turtle, so that's his cooldown gone. But here we gotta take out the Flourishing Ancient as fast as you can, use your cooldowns and stuff. And we lose Adelie here, and then we lose Hubjub. So now we have no damage during this Genesis phase, so Hawk is desperately trying to resurrect him with his bracers. He gets up Hubjub, I think, and then Adelie. Yeah, there's Adelie back up. And there's Hubjub back up. We get a few Lashers. Honestly, I find Lashers are very irrelevant. But, I mean, if you want to step on them, I feel like some groups want them gone. I personally would rather have them up for the padding, but it is what it is. On this next tree, we have a lot of trouble happen. As you can see, Hawk uses his Chi-Ji, hopefully keeping everybody up. Here comes the explosion. There's the damage. Poor Adelie missed his dispersion. And then we have a Incorporeal in the back. Thankfully, we take out the Ancient. We step on the flowers again. I don't know why I bother, but it's more fun when more units are up. But here a few get in the back, so I just use Heroic Throw, Taunt, get them near me. That way I can beat them up. And then we get him very, very low, and unfortunately he spawns another Ancient. But thankfully we are able to defeat him before we end up wiping. But here comes the Ancient. He's at 2%, so we're like, just take out the boss. And thankfully we do. But that is going to be it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully this helps with your Everbloom runs. I know it was kind of messy, but we did end up timing it. This shows that no matter what key level it is, if you have 16 wipes, you can still time it. But yeah, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you're enjoying your holidays, and I will see you in the next one. Laters.